Hi, Matt with etrailer. If you're someone who has a trailer and you're looking for something that's going to be a little bit of an easier process for loading your gear in and out of your trailer, whether it's at the section between your liftgate and the trailer itself, or the liftgate to the ground, then the etrailer transition plates that's going to come in a kit of 2 are going to be a great option for you. So let's check them out. This is going to be great if you're someone who's not only trying to protect their trailer so it lasts a longer time so they can even use it longer for older future loads, but you're also trying to protect the gear that you're trying to load up in here too. So for example, our videographer Josh, he's in the past loaded up a bunch of sound equipment in a trailer, and in the past it has been very difficult because when you're trying to load it in there, your gear can be bouncing all over the place, and some of it is pretty expensive items. And if that were to fall over or have constantly bounce into it, it's probably going to get damaged. This is going to help something with that process, or with Aiden, one of our co-workers who works down here. He's loaded up a couple trailers for band equipment, and that stuff is just really heavy. And after a long day being out in the field, trying to load that back into a trailer, it can be a lot. Something like this is just going to make that process a little bit easier. Something we wanted to do real quick is just going to show you how loading on your trailer is going to be without having those transition plates. Now everyone's trailer is going to be a little bit different, but this is going to give you an idea how it's helping this trailer today. And to help illustrate that, we have 3 different items. So some of these are going to be for common uses like a power wash or a generator you might find yourself in, but what I like most about all of these is they're all going to have different weights. The items on them are going to react differently to this loading process, and they're all going to have different wheel types, so we can really see how each wheel is going to handle this. First up is the power washer. So let's give it a try. Now this power washer is a little bit smaller, so it's not super heavy, but immediately when I'm making contact with the ramp, it does not want to go up. So I'm going to have to lift up on this a little bit, or try to lift up one side and just almost kind of climb up here. Really not too much of a strain there. If anything, just more inconvenient. And then we still have the second location, and that's going to be the hinge at this lift gate. And this is going to drop down, cause a little bit of noise. And if this is just constantly dropping right here, that could really damage something over time. Now we're going to have our generator, and this is a pretty hefty generator. It's very heavy, so we'll see how this handles. Now it does have bigger wheels, but initially, yeah, just immediately stopping right here. Another thing to keep in mind too is if this isn't lifting off the ground too much, you might just make contact with the actual gate itself. So with this, you actually have to lift up a little bit too, and it does feel heavy. If I'm just trying to pull straight like this, I have to use my whole body weight. What you also could do, again, try getting one wheel up here to climb. But at the end of the day, this is not going to be fun to deal with. Then once we actually get it in here, we got that big drop right there. Kind of annoying, kind of noisy too. Not a big fan of that. And the last one is going to be that blue cart. Now there's 2 things that stand out about this one. It's going to have those smaller wheels. That's going to be a lot harder for this to really get it in place here. And it's going to have a loose load on top. So we got some tire chain and some salt on the bottom. And we're going to see how that shifts when we're trying to fight with this. And since these wheels are so small, I'm definitely going to have to pull from one side. And just like that, there's no way those wheels are going over that bump there. What I'm going to have to do is have to lift at some point. Luckily, my heavy spot is on the back side of this, so when I lift up, it shouldn't fight me too much. And this is a pretty aggressive first hit here. If I had some type of ramp, that would kind of ease on into that and make it less likely of anything falling off. These wheels are just so small. I had to really pivot pretty highly up here, and is making this load very unstable. I'm having to put a lot of strength into it to actually get it back in place. And now I have to do it on the other side now. Going down is not too bad. We'll just make that last drop. And we've lost our tire chains. And now we're going to load all 3 of these items onto our trailer. Same type of test, just testing how the wheels are going to handle the different weights and the different types of loads that we have. Pulling the power washer on, you're going to see how that handles. That pretty much glides up here effortlessly. We do have a little bit of a drop after the plate. Let me try going back over it from this side though. So there's going to be a little bit of resistance here. You can see you'll probably have to kind of push it up. But other than that, everything feels pretty smooth, and this is definitely an upgrade. We'll see how those wheels handle it. Got to pull up a little bit, but that is mostly due to this just being up an incline. And we'll go over the next bump. I didn't feel any difference there. That is a big upgrade in terms of really loading up heavy objects. I'll try going backwards. Yeah, we're going to have a little bit of resistance here. If I keep pushing though, actually the liftgate lifts up some and allows this to work way better. And honestly, for heavy objects, I think this is working phenomenal. And the last one is going to be a cart with the loose load. Try this out. And yeah, there's barely anything there. That's a pretty smooth movement. Has just a resistance for a second. But other than that, it's pretty much night and day with how this is going to work. I'll try going backwards now. Now I will say, this is a little bit tough to get over. I am having some issue here, so I'll have to probably do that same technique. I'll lift up one tire, lift up the other one. But again, these are some pretty small tires, and it's pretty heavy on this back half. But everything other than that is working just fine. Got a little bit of a bump there. There's a pretty big difference between how it's going to work compared to not having one and having these. And what's even more is, I thought it worked best with those heavy loads, and what's really nice about that is these are going to have the weight capacity of 1,000 pounds. So really they're designed for heavy loads too, so they're going to last a long time. And what's also great is when I'm stepping on them, when you have those heavy loads too, things can kind of slip or lose control of something, especially when it's wet outside. And what's nice about this is when I step on it, it's going to give me a lot of traction, and that's going to be because we have this type of tape on top, and this is going to be our traction tape, and that's going to help giving us a lot more traction when we are moving those heavy loads. What's nice about this kit of 2, unlike with the kit of 1, with the kit of 1 you have to choose if you want to make it easy to load up from the liftgate or to the trailer. This one, we're getting the best of both worlds, so it's going to be a full smooth transition like that. I will say it does make the whole process a little bit heavier. You'll notice when you lift up on these, sometimes this will have some flex of it. That's just because that heft, because it is rated pretty highly. These are going to be about 45 pounds roughly per one, so you are adding a lot of weight to your liftgate. But what's nice is we can actually secure these down, make sure it's going to be nice and compact. And with these brackets they come with, it's going to prevent any rattling from when driving down the road. And it's also going to help them engage as soon as you're ready to load up. But I'll show you now, right now, this is pretty heavy. I'm actually having to use a decent amount of force to push it up. So I do recommend one of two things. Probably getting this recalibrated by an expert so you can make sure you are safely lifting this up. Or you might even have to invest in a new one if it's not going to be rated for the same amount. But honestly, I'd rather have to put a little bit more effort into lifting up my liftgate as opposed to working a hard, long day, maybe in the heat, we have to lift your items back into your trailer. You definitely don't want to fight it with it at that point. Now for actually installing it, there's really not too much that goes into it. You're really just drilling into the liftgate, a little bit of the inside of your trailer. Now if you're someone who already owns this, we'd love to hear what you have to say about it, what that installation looked like. and what you use with it on a daily basis, whether you're using this more for work or more for recreational uses. But if you are curious to see what that installation looks like, just stay tuned. We'll walk you through it. So to begin the installation, I like to get my parts ready to go. So let's go over what's going to come over in your kit. So with your kit, you're going to get 3 pieces of the plate. So this is going to be the center one. The ones for the side are going to have this bracket on them. It's going to be on the opposite side of one another, and that's what it'll look like. So I'll put that back into place. And then you're going to have the hardware. I like to leave the hardware in the bag for right now. We'll go over it a little bit more in detail later on, just so I don't lose any of these components. And you'll also have 2 brackets. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we're going to have these hand knobs that come with them. Now, something that I recommend you kind of grab to get this kind of rolling is going to be a tape measure, just so you can measure everything out. And we're going to make sure we have our drill, and then we're going to have a hex socket adapter. And the 2 sockets we're going to be using are going to be a 10 millimeter and a 13 millimeter. The first step really is just going to be making sure if we need this center plate or not. The way we're going to be doing that is by roughly placing out or mapping out where these plates sit. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to start off with this hinge point on our lift gate. And what I'm going to do is get these in a rough idea where I want them to sit. We don't want something like this, because there's going to be a pretty big gap right here. That's not going to give us a very clean look, and it's just going to not be a good fit for when we are using this. So I'm going to make sure everything's contoured a little bit better. So I'm going to pull it in just like that. That's a smoother transition right there. Doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're just getting a rough estimates. And then I'm going to check over here on the side. So if I had this pushed over more, you notice this tie-down point is going to get in our way, and we don't want that. So I'm going to bring that in just a tad bit, and that's looking pretty good there. Nothing's going to interfere with us. I'm going to repeat that on this side over here too, and this one's already looking good. And what we can do at this point is grab our tape measure. What I'm going to do is go to the widest point on the first bracket, or the first plate, and then go to the widest point over here too, and we're looking at a little bit over 63 inches. And why this measurement is going to matter for you is if your measurement is under 58 inches, you're not going to need that center plate. If your measurement is over 58 inches, you are going to need the center plate. So in my case, I'm going to be installing that too. And we just want to double check that everything is in the right orientation. And what I mean by that is with these plates, this one right here, you'll notice this bracket is closest to the wall. You want it to look like that on either side. And also just double checking that we have this traction tape facing up. Now what we're going to do, in my case, I'm going to grab my transition plate, or the center one. And if you're using just 2 plates, you're just going to have these overlapped on one another. I'll show you that process a little bit more here in a second, because we want to line up these holes now. But with the third one, you're just going to lay that on top. Try to get it as centered as possible and lower it down. And our goal here is to line up these holes. And I'm already starting to line up with some of them over here. So that's looking pretty good. And then I'm going to just double check that on the other side here. And I'm not lining up with anything. So I'm just going to adjust this a bit. I'll probably lift up, see where those holes are exactly. And I might be able to push this out just a tad bit. Now if I run into the situation where we're going to make contact with something out here, then I'll probably stop. But we're looking good. We're not going to interfere with these tie downs. Now, if you are going to interfere with something, just bring it in instead. But once we have this kind of roughly mapped out, then we can kind of grab some of our carriage bolts and mount this together. We got our hardware now, so we're going to start off with some carriage bolts. And what I'll do is find those holes. We want to find the ones that we'll be using, so I'll put those through. And what's nice about this is it'll help keep everything aligned. And you're going to have a total of 8 of these. You'll notice there's going to be more than 8 holes too, so what I'll do is keep them on the outside ones. A lot of times these ones in the center aren't going to be used anyways. It's also going to depend on the size of your liftgate. Try not to lose them too. Again, this is just going to help us keep everything aligned before we lift this up. Now, lifting this up can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Reason being is not everything's together quite yet, and these are a little bit heavy too, so I'll show you how I'm going to handle this one here in a second. With that kind of roughly in line, I'm going to start from one side. If you can have someone help you, they'll help go a long way, but sometimes you don't always have someone along the way. So I'll just start here, lift here, lift it up like that. This is a pretty good start. And then I'm just going to grab a washer, push it on there, and then I'm going to grab a nylon lock nut, put it on the very end. We're not going to tighten this down all the way quite yet. We just wanted to kind of get it to hold in place for the time being. It'll do half the work for us, so we're not fighting it the entire time, having bolts fall out on us. But yeah, you'll just repeat this for all the bolts that you've put in your plate. And I laid this all the way down, and this time we have the nuts facing up. That's going to apply pressure to the heads, and that's going to help them push through those little square holes that keep them in place. And then we're just going to come back over here. We're going to grab our 13mm socket. We have our adapter on here, and we got our drill, and we can tighten this down the rest of the way down. And you'll just repeat that for the rest of them. If you're just using the 2 plates, what you're going to do instead is when I push this up, you notice all those little holes we used earlier. Instead of using that 3rd plate, these 2 ones on the side are just going to align at one point or multiple points, just depending on the width of your trailer. But we can actually start installing this now. So what I'm going to do is realign this with the gate on my trailer. Kind of push this into place. Again, we want to make sure we have that smooth, even transition. What I'll do a lot of times is just grab my tape measure, and we'll make sure everything's even. So I'm going to go to either side. Right here it's going to be a little bit easier. So we'll just measure from the side of the lift gate to the edge of this. Just make sure it's the same on the other side. If it's not, we'll just adjust that a little bit. With that adjusted sum, I also want to make sure that it's also pretty squared off. So what I'll do here is measure how far this edge is sitting from the inner edge of your left gate. And we're just going to double check the other side too. And this will let us know if it's squared or not. And again, if it's a little bit off, we'll just adjust it from there. We're going to find our little bracket on either side. We're going to grab the screws that come with your kit, and we're going to bolt one of those holes down. We're going to do that on either side too. So I'll just make sure when I'm doing this, I'm grabbing my drill, and I'm going to grab a 10mm socket. secure this into place. There you have it. I'm going to repeat this process on the other side. We got one screw in each one of those brackets, and I'm just going to test this out to make sure it's moving smoothly. We're not having too much interference with it. I don't need to move it up all the way quite yet, just enough to make sure it's not going to get caught on anything. And that's feeling pretty smooth just as is. So what I'm going to do from here is the rest of those holes you have on either side of the bracket, we're just going to put the rest of the screws in place to secure it fully down. The last step is just going to be installing these brackets. Now there are going to be two of them, and to do that we're actually going to have to close up the trailer. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'll get inside from the other side. You got two options. You could either try to drill into this now and put this into place. So really what you're doing is finding two spots on the side and putting the two-hole end against the door. That's the way it's going to sit, and what's going to happen is this plate is going to slide up right into place. The other way, which I'm going to do, is I'm just going to kind of place it where I want it to sit and just make some markers now, and then I'm going to push my liftgate down just so when I'm drilling into this, my door isn't pushing away from me. And now that I got those spots marked out, I'll just install this now. I want to make sure this is pretty square. Tighten that down the rest of the way. And repeat that for the second one. So with both sides secured down, then I can lift up my liftgate and make sure everything is properly getting into place and not missing at the mark. And there we have it. One down, one more to go. So with this one, same process as the other one for assembling it together. You're just making sure that when it is in use, it's not going to interact with anything or make contact with anything on your liftgate, and just finding the right spots for them to really see into each other to assemble the whole piece. But there is a little bit of a difference for putting it on your liftgate. So what we're doing this time is a little bit different. What we're doing is we're finding this cutout right by this hinge. And this hinge, we want this edge here to be lined up with the edge of our liftgate that we're drilling into. Once we've done that on both sides, and we've measured out from the sides to get this centered up, then we can start drilling into this. I'm going to do the same process like we did with the other one, where I'm going to just drill into one of these, and then do that on both sides, and make sure this is going to work properly. Now we can test it out, and I will say with this one in this spot, you're probably going to run into some complications. A lot of times, it's going to want to catch here in the center when you lift this up. We'll see if it happens now. Okay, that's pretty smooth. So right now we're good. We didn't get caught on anything. What will happen sometimes is this point here, when you reach about, I want to say, close to 45-degree angles, it'll get caught up on the edge of that liftgate and kind of tear through that wood sometimes. If you're running into that issue, just shift this down, just barely down, just enough to avoid that. But now we're not having any complications, so what we can do is secure the rest of those screws into place. And the last step for this side too is installing that bracket. Now this one's going to be a little bit different from the other side. I'll kind of show you what I mean. So we're going to start off by lifting this up and laying this down. And you probably notice working with these, there are some holes on either side. We're going to actually line this bracket up with those holes. Again, the bracket is going to have the two holes on it. That's going to be the side that is against your gate, and then we're going to have our hand knob. What this hand knob is going to do is it's going to go through that plate and secure into this bracket we have. So I'll do that now. I'll push that bracket underneath until the holes are lined up. This seems like a pretty good spot. Secure this hand knob like this. Make sure it's pretty well secured. Then from here, we're going to grab our screws and finish the job. Securing this bracket all the way down. Might need to adjust that a little bit. Might need to loosen up that hand knob. Sometimes if you have it too tight, it won't line up properly. And I'll try the other side too. But that'll do it for our look at the installation and some of the features of the etrailer transition plates. That's a kit of 2. But again, I'm Matt, and thanks for watching.